Jared Polin, FronosPhoto.com, with a special interview section here that's going to be pretty interesting because we have somebody from space. They're not actually in space currently, but they were recently, and that's more than I can ever say for myself. But we've got Randy Bresnik here, who's are you in where are you right now?
Johnson Space Center, just back on my third day back from space.
So you're back in Houston.
Back in Houston.
Yeah, which is super awesome. So what is interesting is that I love the fact that I can just call NASA and set something up like this, which is awesome. But then I was going to really look forward to talking about photography-related questions, and they said you would be the perfect person for that. So what was the greatest challenge while in the space station while shooting photos in space?
Is trying to get the photos to look like what we saw with the naked eye. We're able to, see these incredible colors and vibrancy and all that, but then you're shooting through the atmosphere, and that would then show up in the photo. And so it was tough, especially with sunrises and sunsets where the sun was cutting through the atmosphere at an angle. That really changed the way the photos look a lot once we actually got them on saw the image.
Wow. So did you have to use any special type of filters, or the glass that you're shooting through on the space station, by any chance, is it polarized?
Yes, we did have protection because otherwise we'd have a pretty bad sunburn up there at our windows. The other challenge we had was we actually have on the cupola, the main area and the best spot to take photos, it had scratch panes. And unfortunately, the scratch panes are not of really great optical qualities. So we actually were not able to shoot through them with anything more than about 200 millimeters. Fortunately, did have some windows where we actually pull apart some slides that went just to the actual glass. And through that, we could shoot everything to whatever size lens you'd like. And so we were able to shoot up to, the 400 or 800 millimeter lenses, but just in a very fixed area within the cupola.
In 800 5.6 up in space. That must have cost a pretty penny just to get up there.
Yes, your taxpayer dollars hard at work.
Yeah. Well, at least they're getting used for the photography purposes. Now, did you have a go-to lens while you were up there?
For me, for daytime, there was a 50 to 500 lens that I really liked. As you can see from my photos, I like to try and, give people a frame of reference and then be able to zoom in and take a picture of the individual item, but not have it just be an isolated picture within, a whole bunch of pictures. I was trying to, hey, here's where that area is based on, from the horizon. Here's what its surroundings, and then zoom on in and take the pictures. That was really nice. And then, fortunately, the last, I guess about 3 weeks that we were up there, after a Cygnus cargo vehicle came up, we went from Nikon D4s to Nikon D5s. And all of a sudden, we were able to shoot nighttime with the higher ISOs with that sensor. And I had a 70 to 200 that I was able to shoot out handheld at night like I was shooting in daytime. It was awesome.
Well, so speaking of handheld, do you need the VR or the stability, or does the 0G give you that?
You need it because if you are not stabilizing yourself, sure you can shoot, but you may not get the actual photo that you want. And so you had to stabilize yourself for any nighttime stuff. Until we got those D5s, you had to have what we call a bogan arm, basically a tripod that we could attach to a handrail.
I mean, that's interesting to think about the stability aspect of it in 0G, having to use a bogan arm for something like that. What type of shutter speeds are you shooting with that?
Typically for daytime stuff, we would, as a general rule of thumb, we'd be shooting, a shutter priority for daytime stuff, pretty much 1 over the focal length of the lens. And so if you're, shooting your 800 millimeter, you'd be, a hundredth. And, for that 50 to 500, a lot of times I'd be typically shooting 1 over 500. So that was the normal speed, and that worked out pretty well. And the lens would then adjust the aperture.
Sure. Now, are you shooting for mostly scientific purposes, or is there any just, hey, I'm being creative and I'm shooting because it's amazing?
The majority, I would say, is for just admiration of the beautiful Earth and sharing that with everybody else. That was what was, for me, that was my enjoyable, free time was shooting the Earth. We did have scientific targets, and those would actually show up on our schedule, and they'd ask for specific sites. Sometimes we did a lot of international disaster charter sites with all the different hurricanes that came through the fall, through the wildfires out in California, through the flooding of the Orinoco River over there in South America. And then we also did other sites that were, the geoglyphs over in Kazakhstan. and things like that, World Heritage sites and different targets that different investigators want to try and have some sort of scientific data on. It turns out that just taking the pictures of the hurricanes from the angles, because we would come at the hurricanes and, come at different angles and shoot as we went over the top. That's pictures that the scientific, weather guys are not able to get from the satellites who just sit up there and pass such a high area. And so they're actually able to take those photos, and we're told that at the universities are using those to help model how the hurricanes form and act and behave, and so that we get better prediction on things like that. And then definitely as a human being, being able to look at these massive hurricanes and look right down the center of the eye. Wow. And see the blue and see little puffy clouds just sitting there not moving at all. That was one of the most amazing parts of seeing that particular weather phenomenon.
So the question is, if you miss it on the first go around, how long does it take to get back to that same spot or similar close enough spot?
Yeah, I mean, because the Earth is rotating underneath us, you don't come back to the exact same spot, but you'll be close in about an hour and a half, because it's 90 minutes to go around the whole Earth. 6 minutes or 6 miles every second.
Wow. I mean, there's no really perspective on that, is there? You're just moving, so you don't really feel like, I don't know. What do you feel like?
It's one of those things that if you see something beautiful coming up on the horizon, you got to grab the camera pretty quick, because it's going to be right there. You have to shoot it, and it's going to be gone out the back window really quick. You do know that, hey, in an hour and a half, I'll be a little bit to the side of it. I might catch part of it, or in 24 hours, I'll be back to just about the same spot.
It's mind blowing to think about being there, and obviously you've been there a couple times. In terms of shooting, I did email ahead, and they said that you guys do shoot RAW up there. Are you shooting RAW when you're up there?
Absolutely. We let them go ahead and shoot the best the camera can do and let them process it on the ground. For me, personally, I shot with JPEG and RAW so that then I could put the pictures on my laptop, and you look at the JPEGs and be able to send the RAWs down to the ground, so I didn't completely fill up my laptop and not be able to look at this stuff.
Exactly.
So that was one way that I made it work.
Oh, that's great. And so what does a RAW workflow look like? How long does it take to transmit those RAW files? Because the D5 files aren't the biggest in the world, but those RAW files are about 42 megabytes a piece.
Well, especially when we went from the D4, where we're shooting time lapses of 999 pictures, to where we're now shooting the D5 with not only with 2 cards up to 9,999 pictures in a time lapse. We were filling up computers pretty quick, and while we'd sleep, they'd be downloading them as quick as they could, because the scientific data had priority, but the photographic stuff would then come quickly after that. But they were thankful for when we had work to do, so we weren't shooting pictures and filling up the photography banks.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. Now I've read about your spacewalks. Has there been an opportunity to just turn around, look at Earth, hopefully when work is done, and just look in awe? There
were few opportunities. Unfortunately, this was, I'd done a couple of spacewalks before, so I kind of knew when I could, maybe take a moment and take some pictures. And I tried to capture my spacewalking partner, tried to capture Earth with the space station in it, just capture parts of Earth with it, weren't through a window. And then actually on all 3 spacewalks, carried a GoPro. And on the last one, actually mounted it to my workstation rather than have it be just tethered to me bouncing around. And we actually ended up posting videos on the at Astro Comrade of different parts coming out of the hatch, the first view as you come out. Wow. Or just at one point where I said, hey, Houston, do you mind if I pause here? Because Houston was coming up, and just take a look. And it was looking out forward of the space station, having the Earth roll underneath you. And it was just nothing but me and my visor and that GoPro looking forward. And hopefully that is able to translate. I haven't actually been able to see the videos yet, because I just got back. But hopefully that's something that that wide angle view can really help immerse people and have them give them a sense of what it's like to be out there.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like to. No, I can't even imagine it. I can only see what the movies have shown me, to sit there and go, oh wow, that looks pretty amazing to be floating there. Now, did you actually have a camera outside? Other than the GoPro to do the stills?
Yeah, we always carry an EVA camera, and typically that was a 28 millimeter lens on the same Nikon D4 that we had on the inside. They have the same lubricant that could go from the plus 250 degrees in the sun to the minus 250 degrees in the shade. We had a a lens on the back that allowed us to, because we couldn't get our eye up to it to really frame the picture. We would just basically allow us kind of like I forget the name of it, but it was a lens that allowed us to look from our visors to it to kind of see what we were pointing at, and then just be able to take the pictures as available through the big huge oven mitts that were our space gloves, trying to find the shutter release and take the pictures. But it worked really well, and we were able to get some really nice pictures using those cameras. The GoPro was just a bonus and a new way to be able to try and capture what we're doing and share that with folks. You mentioned be able to understand and see what we do. And one project we did was we took and we made the best pictures and videos we had during the first part of our increment and put it to music. And it was the Sound of Silence video that people can find online on YouTube that puts an audible feeling and texture to the pictures and video to try and help give an added dimension to sharing this beautiful planet that we're on and being able to orbit with you guys.
Have you had a chance to look back at some of the early photos done with the Hasselblads? Have you ever thought what it would be like to try and shoot that type of camera while doing a spacewalk?
It's hard enough with the most modern technology to get a photo out there. I can't imagine using something that like a Hasselblad. My grandfather was a professional photographer back in the 30s and 40s, and he had cameras like that. I grew up seeing him, with those type of cameras and folding up the top of the Hasselblad and the shutter release on the right side of the lens. And I just, it's amazing. I mean, for me, using that D4 outside with the huge oven mitts of the space glove with a visor, fishbowl, trying to just frame the shot, it was a lot of and you're trying to hold on to not, float around too much, while you're out there, so trying to one hand it, and it's just, it was a challenge. That would have been really tough with a older camera.
Yes. When you're back on Earth, do you shoot? Do you go out and shoot photos, or is it just primarily when you're working?
No, I mean, that's why I had the project, the One World Many Views. I've shot photos for my whole adult life and growing up, since my grandfather was a photographer. Growing up with him, learned how to develop photos in his dark room and everything at his house, because he used to have his own studio, and then he taught me when he had sold his studio. And so I've always gone through life, I feel like, looking through life through a photographer's lens. And so any chance I've had to be able to pick up any camera, whatever it is, going to digital was a big stretch for me, years ago, and leaving, film. But then, having family and kids and seeing what excites them, and still being able to go places and enjoy the beauty of it, and then be able to while I was on this increment with that One World Many Views project, take a picture from space, put it with that picture from the ground, in the hope that people who are from there feel like more part of the space program, because they go, hey, here's me on the ground, and here's what I look like from space. And the people that are not from that area, who have never seen that area, might look at it and go, wow, that's a beautiful place from space. That's a beautiful place from the ground. Maybe I want to go there. Sure. And then the world gets a little smaller, person to person. And when people go there, they go, hey, maybe I feel a little more a part of that place when I see it for the first time.
Is there something that you wanted to capture in space, or that you weren't able to with either the technology that we have now? Is there a tool that would make that easier in the future if it existed?
There were some places I couldn't photograph because of weather, or just because of the time. I wasn't available at the time. Technology-wise, there were things that I wanted to photograph that I didn't have a camera for. If there's some point in the future where what your mind's eye sees, you can photograph, then that would be wicked cool.
That would probably, is it like you see it in your mind, and then there's a camera somewhere and you can just trigger it by looking, would be,
either that or it's something we're wearing that you can, just go, the camera's in the glasses that you have right now, and it's able to take that picture that you're seeing.
Yeah. Now, how have the Nikons held up in space? I mean, because we know that they're not modified for the most part. Have they held up well?
No, they've been phenomenal. The only thing that happens to any of our still cameras or our video cameras is they get radiation hits. There's cosmic rays that come through and hit the sensors and cause pixel damage.
Oh, wow.
And so with the red camera we had, it was able to fix itself and heal itself a lot. Our video cameras and our Nikon still cameras, those you had to actually, if you're taking time lapses or things like that, we would take dark frames. So then on the ground they could correct for the pixel damage and correct the images. And that's just, nature of the beast. We don't have Earth's protective atmosphere to go ahead and, remediate some of that radiation. And so we just have pixel damages. That's another reason why we're excited to get the D5s, because we had fresh sensors. We didn't have to worry about the sensor damage.
Well, then how are they protecting you? And what are the precautions there to make sure that you're not getting pixel damage on the cellular level?
Yeah, well, we have the radiation shielding provided partly by the shell of the space station. That's one of the biggest problems and challenges we have for going anywhere outside of low Earth orbit, because the Van Allen radiation belt is well above us, the space station level. And so when we leave that to go to the moon or go to the Mars, we are really unprotected for radiation. And so that is radiation, shielding typically on the ground is lead. Lead is heavy. We can't build spaceships out of lead. So what can we use to go ahead and mitigate the radiation challenges that we have? That's something we're really working on. Water works well, but water is also heavy. We can drink water, but then if we drink water, well, then we don't have it for radiation shielding. So that's all stuff that all these space agencies around the world are working on, so we can go to the moon and go to Mars and go beyond that, and protect the little pink squishy bodies that we hope to be able to do into the exploration work once we get there.
You brought up Mars. Would you take a flight to Mars if it became available tomorrow?
I think it would be wonderful and amazing to do. I look at how excited we as a human planet were when we first stepped foot on the moon. I think it'll be even an order of magnitude bigger when we actually do it on Mars. And hopefully, I don't think with current technology that it'll be someone at my age and anyone that's currently an astronaut, but it's exciting to see kids get excited about what we're doing now, and knowing that there are kids that are in school right now that'll be somewhere around the world right now is the one that'll be setting foot on Mars for all of us as humans here, hopefully in the no later than the 2030s.
That's awesome. I mean, it is incredible to think about. And I do have one last quick question. How much time do you need to spend working out in space, and what can you actually do up there?
We have on our schedule every day 2.5 hours. An hour of cardio, whether we're either on the exercise bicycle, and we got toe clips and shoes, so we're able to stand there and not float off. And then we have a treadmill, which has a harness around our shoulders and our waist, kind of like you would like a camping backpack, that then has hooks on the side that goes down to bungees that holds us down to the treadmill. And you can adjust the amount of hooks that you have to adjust the force that it holds you onto the treadmill with, whether you want to be half gravity or three quarters, or like I was doing last week before coming home, basically to my full body weight, so my muscles and body weight and back would get used to it. And then the other hour and a half is on our resistive exercise device, which is basically a weightlifting machine. Well, there isn't weight in space, but we have vacuum chambers, and you can dial in any amount of weight, just like putting different a 5-pounder or 10-pound on a bar, and you're doing it in the gym. And we spend an hour and a half on that on your full body. And the fact that I am sitting here in a chair, 3 days after landing, be able to walk around and do all the medical stuff, do the reconditioning, be able to do the interviews, is amazing to me. I mean, the fact that all these things that I've worked so hard on for 5 months every day with all this exercise allows me to come back to Earth, go to 1G, and be able to do this stuff just within a few days is just astounding. And that's really another part of what we're doing on the space station, is not only how do we protect the bodies from radiation, how do we ensure their health and make sure that when we get to Mars after a 6-month or a 9-month journey, I can have that person step off the spacecraft, put that footprint down, plant the human flag, and then go to work the next day, rather than sitting there trying to recuperate and get used to gravity again.
Absolutely fascinating. I wish we had more time. I have a million questions, or a billion, as many billions and billions of stars and all that stuff. I thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and speak with us. And I hope everybody out there enjoys this conversation. Where can they follow you on the Instagram?
At AstroComrade, Komrade. And I hope everybody enjoys those photos, because I've been one of the few fortunate people to be able to, go to space. We had 550 something people that have done that in all of humanity. And hopefully with the work we're doing right now, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, people will be able to buy a ticket to space just as easily as they would be able to buy a ticket to go to Florida.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Take care and have a great Christmas and New Year's.
Thanks. You as well. So there you have it, guys. Pretty awesome, right? Give NASA a call and say, hey, I'd love to do an interview with somebody on the space station. Now, we're going to work on that one next, to talk to somebody in space so that they can turn the camera around and be like, look, there you are. You're that light thing down there many miles below. But that was absolutely awesome. I have so many questions that I would love to ask. I hope we can do this again and have a longer conversation, because it's just fascinating. My last thing for you guys out there watching, leave comments down below with what your questions would be if I didn't get a chance to answer it, ask it, and maybe NASA people over at NASA can chime in on the comments on Facebook and YouTube and give us answers, or maybe we could get some more answers for the future, or questions for the future. So I'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.